going on?
Sanders, what's going on?
It's Mega-Maid. She's gone from suck to blow.
What? They're getting all their air back. Do something.
Do something.
Do something!
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and just last week I had Eric Breen on the channel. We were talking about how, DC's Infinite Frontier rollout. We finally have the solicitations. We have all the creators' names, and we're going, where's Peter Tomasi? Where's Dan Jurgens? Where's Robert Venditti? Why is Joshua Williamson only doing backup stories? And it turns, I had some speculation and some wonderment out there. Like, did Tomasi even know? Because it appeared, via some tweets that he and his artistic collaborator, Brad Walker, maybe weren't informed by DC Comics that they were no longer the creative team behind Detective Comics. Obviously, we talked about enough on the channel how much Peter J. Tomasi has been screwed over by DC Comics in recent years after doing nothing but great work for them. And it turns out that some of those fears have been realized, and here to talk with me about that is the man so cool, they call him the Breen. Eric Breen, how you doing?
Pretty good, Wes.
Well, I'm glad you could make it. Obviously, we had some opinions last week talking about, hey, if you want to put your best foot forward, you have to put your best creators out there. But it feels like DC doesn't want to put their best foot forward just as far as their production, and it doesn't feel like they want to put their best foot forward as far as professionalism anymore. Now, before I get into all these details, I do want to say, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs down if you don't. Either way, we want to hear from you in the comments section. Are you a little surprised that Jim Lee didn't go out to some of these longtime DC creators and let them know, hey, you're not on the book anymore. You're not the Nightwing writer anymore. You're not the Detective Comics writer anymore. And I don't know. Breen, am I insane? Am I out of my gourd that it would be a professional courtesy of somebody in DC Comics, even though they've had some turnover lately, to let Peter J. Tomasi and Brad Walker know you're no longer the creators behind Detective Comics? To let Dan Jurgens know you're not writing Nightwing anymore. We're bringing some people in. Well, I guess that one is actually Tom Taylor, so he's at least had some success in the industry. Mariko Tamaki has not. You're being replaced by some new creators. Should not Jim Lee himself maybe have given them a phone call and a little courtesy, a little professional courtesy, and let them know, hey, we appreciate your time here on Detective Comics. We appreciate what you tried to do with Rick Grayson and Nightwing. You were put in a bad position. You did the best you could, but you're no longer going to be writing those characters following Future State and into Infinite Frontier.
My first takeaway is I'm not 100% sure anymore that Jim Lee even knew, because I'm really starting to wonder what his role is.
What does he do?
Yeah, I heard a great line, in one of your previous videos. They got the introvert to do the job of the extrovert. So it's either they didn't tell him and he's just kind of there to be propped up when they need a recognizable face to sell to the public for the next few months before he's given the door, or he did know and he couldn't figure out how to do it because he didn't want to be the guy to go tell people with fantastic track records that they're being replaced by people with no track records or not so good.
So he's the 15-year-old dude that's too scared to tell his girlfriend they're not dating anymore.
That's one of the possibilities. Yeah. Or the other possibility is that there's one of the things from losing all the editors is whoever's job it is to tell the people that they're no longer on the books, they either don't know that that's their job, or the line of communications broke down because there may not be one right now, and nobody knows.
Feels like that's the publisher's job, or maybe the editor-in-chief, which would be Marie Javins.
You would think.
You would think.
Or Jim Lee again, but who knows how the communication's working at DC these days.
I don't know. I'm a big DC fan. Some people are like, all you do is talk good about DC Comics. Well, I think all I do is try to provide an honest perspective and opinion or my, at least my opinion on what's happening. And I think people can see I've turned a little bit on DC Comics here at the end of 2020. Felt like they were handling the shutdown pretty well. Brought some new distribution online. Felt like they were trying to come out of the pandemic, guns blazing, help retailers out. And it turns out, yeah, they had a good moment. But everything after that has been absolutely atrocious. Like Endless Winter, okay, apparently it's a pretty decent story. But it means nothing in the long term. You know, it's going to have no effects on the DC universe. Future State probably should have been scrapped altogether. Somehow they've decided to forge on with it, bring in all these crappy creators no one was excited about. It's going to fail miserably. And then they've decided to keep those same creators into Infinite Frontier, you know, with a couple of add-ons, you know, that people are kind of excited about. You know, I'm going to read Nightwing with Tom Kaler. Other than that, you know, there's not a lot of books out there. But just not giving people the professional courtesy of a fucking phone call because you're scared that they might not be happy with the news that you give them. Just that does feel like what probably happened with Jim Lee, doesn't it?
If I had to pick one or the other, I would say he didn't want to make those calls. And I guess he figured if he put it off long enough, it would get to them somehow. And he could say, oh, yeah, I meant to call. I was going to call. I just didn't know how I was going to say it. And, yeah, gee whiz, I'm sorry, but.
Like, I'm not the biggest fan of Data. What I've mentioned here on the channel, like, I'm already like, man, they could probably use a guy like that. You know, at least he's got some balls. He'll go out and he's going to let his people know, and he's going to have their back and let them know, hey, you might need to look for work now because come March, you're doing the digital exclusive Super Sons book, but you're not doing anything else, Peter J. Tomasi. You do have a skill. You do have skills and a name in the industry and a reputation. Maybe you should go do a crowdfunding project. Maybe you should go look for an independent project to go do. But they just sit there and leave them flapping in the wind. It infuriates me just to no end on the behalf of Brad Walker, on the behalf of Peter J. Tomasi, and the other creators at DC that weren't even given a phone call. Breen, calm me down. Tell me I'm insane.
No, the only thing I could possibly say to kind of understand why Jim Lee or any of the people still working at DC that still gives a flip about comics, and believe me, this is not excusing this, is maybe they were thinking, well, we know what's coming, and DC is going to place a much greater emphasis on anybody but the creative people that have been here for years. We're going to go in a whole different direction. But maybe if I put off telling them, maybe they'll change their mind and go, you know, Tomasi's better on detective than Tamaki. Maybe we'd rather have Robert Venditti doing a book than a guy that wrote an issue of Superstore. And now it's obviously that's not going to happen. So yeah, they just kind of let these guys flapping in the breeze, and
they have families. You know what I mean? Sure, they knew their contracts were up, but you need to tell them, you know, we've been renewing your work for this amount of time. You know, this is the end, and you just leave them out there like, you know, they have mortgages. They got dogs to take care of. They got kids in school and stuff like that. And it's just, it feels unconscionable that you wouldn't look out for your people like that. That is some of the worst leadership and leadership tendencies, traits, perspective. I can't imagine leaders being like that with their people. Just spineless, completely gutless.
Yeah, regardless of how much turmoil there is behind the scenes, someone owes these folks a timely call to let them know, hey, it's time to go sell your wares elsewhere. And this, it really is inexcusable. And and we can bang on Jim Lee. I have a feeling he's going to be standing right next to him sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about, we got some more firings coming up in 2021. Not sure exactly how much meat's left on the bone, to talk about it on Pershel. Like, what the hell's up with Jim Lee? Why is he still working there? Like, what the fuck does he bring to the table anymore? Well, he's the face of the franchise. What is it? His YouTube channel? Like, where he's drawing comics? Richard Meyer used to draw comics on YouTube. Obviously he's not as good an artist as Jim Lee, but, get out there in the front and lead. You know, like you're being paid to do. It feels like he's collecting a paycheck and doing nothing.
Yeah, I think he's just there to be the recognizable face during this transition. And then, like I said, I think he's on the clock as well, because clearly it's starting to become clearer by the day that DC, their focus has very little to do with actual comic books and everything to do with what the ones that are still publishing can do for live action. And at the end of the day, Jim Lee is not a bombastic personality. So look for him to be replaced by someone maybe without the talent or knowledge, but with more of the ability to get out and sell himself and the product. But for right now, like I said, he's the name you recognize, and comic book fans that they might want to try to string along for a little while longer, that's a name they can recognize. But once they realize that the creators they've been following are dropping by the wayside, once that's sunk in, and they again continue to court this audience that they've never been able to get, then I think they can go ahead and let him go, because whoever takes his place will be better suited to promote future states and YA and whatever it is that they're going to do going forward.
Maybe I'm crazy here, Breen. Maybe we're having a similar experience. I don't know. We haven't really talked about it this in depth, but like every time I hear a new detail about what DC Comics is doing in 2021, my wallet closes a little bit more. Like future state, whatever. I'm going to review some of the books for the channel, but I'm not really all that interested. Okay, what's happening in March? I'm optimistic. I finally get all the details. Okay, there's 4 books that look pretty good. But now that I'm seeing the way that they're treating the talent, the way that they're treating the fans, and the lack of respect for the people that put them in a position and create all these wonderful characters and stories, the almost contempt for the fans, the readers that made DC Comics a worldwide brand. Because without the readers, Superman doesn't take off. Without the readers and the popularity, Batman doesn't become a household figure as far as movies, cartoons, video games, and all that stuff. It feels like more and more every day that they hate comic book readers, and be damned with them. Screw those guys. They don't mean anything anymore. And the same thing with the creators. Screw that guy that cut his teeth creating great stories for us and making Batman and Superman and all these other characters, Green Lantern, Nightwing, look like $1 million each and every week. Just think about the contributions of Dan Jurgens and Peter J. Tomasi. Obviously, Venditti came in a little bit later. And it feels like this disrespect after disrespect every single week. It's like, why should I even support the company? Obviously, I have a YouTube channel that covers comic books. It's part of the package and what I have to keep up with. But like they make me like I don't want to do it anymore. It's like these guys are dicks.
Well, that leads to another thing. It's clear DC is taking their characters in a different direction, even the recognizable ones. And I'm starting to get the feeling that if you're going to turn characters that have been around for decades into versions that only moviegoers may recognize and that comic book readers would find, not to their liking, for lack of to be polite, probably the easiest way to facilitate that is to get rid of the creators that would fight for the traditional versions of the characters versus who they can bring in that'll be more malleable. And if they say, hey, I want you to make this character this now, it's probably easier to get, like, say they want to make fundamental changes to Batman. Mariko Tamaki is going to go along a lot easier than Peter J. Tomasi, and whether it's Batman or another character. And when we were talking about the Generation Shattered and Generation Forged, I got a little excited because I thought, okay, this has Jurgens, this has Venditti. I don't know who Andy Schmidt is, but he's got a Crime Syndicate series, so I'm excited for that.
Maybe he's been an editor at DC Comics for like 8 years.
But we're not hearing anything past that, so now my interest in even those 2 books is starting to lessen, because if there are no plans for these guys going forward, then I said, you mentioned about your wallet. Why not just padlock the wallet now?
Yeah, what's the point? What's the point? I do firmly believe Robert Medici still has like a JSA or something along those lines that's going to be announced in April or May. I've seen him on Twitter. He said, I've seen pages from 2 unannounced projects. I imagine one of those is DC Comics and another one is probably Bad Idea. Or maybe another independent project. But the other two, I think Tomasi has a digital comic. That's embarrassing.
Now, there's a chance, but it seems to be getting slimmer by the day, that everything that I've said in this conversation is going to turn out to be wrong. Well, actually, that's pretty much every time I have a conversation, but that's beside the point. But and all these creators that were wondering what's happened to them are going to have projects announced, and maybe it's not nearly as bad as I'm starting to think it is. But even if that turns out to be the case, they better get around to making these announcements sooner rather than later, because I don't think we're the only people out there that are shaking our heads going, what the hell are they doing? And just
what
thinking
the
really
fuck is
seriously about
happening in DC Comics?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, man. I don't even know what to say. I don't recognize the company anymore, and at this point I don't know that I want to support it.
It's getting tougher.
It is getting a lot tougher. So I don't know. Is there anything else that you need to get off your chest? I know I was bloviating a lot. I might not have given you enough time to get your thoughts out there. Do you have anything else you wanted to say about the way DC Comics treated their creators, not letting them know that they weren't going to be on the titles that they were working on prior to Infinite Frontier?
No, I think we pretty much covered it. And I said, I'm sure this is an evolving story, so I'm sure we'll get back to it again at some point.
Oh, I'm sure we will. But 2021 feels like it's going to be a dark year for DC Comics, and they deserve it.
Starting to look that way.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.